Hi and welcome to this kind of behind the music look at one of our tracks called Coda that I wrote kind of leading up to the release of Cello Untamed. It's a track that I wanted to show what the power of the instrument was, so I didn't want any other clutter, any other instruments. It is just 4 cellos and nothing else, and it was a track that I wrote in about 40 minutes. I'm not the world's best composer, but this one is one of those ones that just kind of like came together on the keyboard quite quickly. So what we'll do is run through the track in its entirety. The track on the advert, the 60-second advert, is a condensed version of this. So if you've listened to that one, this is the longer one that's on SoundCloud and on the demo pages. This is what I wrote first and then condensed it down to the 60 seconds for the Instagram video and things like that. So we'll run it through in its entirety with the MIDI data on the screen, so you kind of get an idea of what I've done, and then we'll break down some of the things that I kind of like about it and how I came up with the chords, and then a little bit about the processing, all those kind of things. So let's just go for it. Let's run the track first, and then we'll go from there. So hopefully, as you could see and hear there, this is quite a simple, simple composition. I am definitely not an amazing award-winning composer, but this kind of instrument suits me down to the ground because I can do stuff that's quite simple and then add, some of this stuff, and it kind of lifts it, more than it should do. There's a couple of notes in there that do just last kind of like 5, 6. There's one at the beginning that just lasts for like 20 bars, but because the notes are constantly changing and evolving and changing in their performance, it kind of just it really carries it along. So how I wrote the piece to begin with was just used one patch in one channel. I maybe went for 5 or 6 live takes of the whole composition. And then once I was happy with that kind of like one take, I split it up into 4 channels, 4 separate cellos, and then just kind of like decided which you know, if the bass cello, the cello that was doing the bass notes was playing this, what would it play? There was plenty of times where I kind of like got carried away and played 5 or 6 notes, but I was really kind of interested in going, no, what would this sound like if it was just 4 cellos? If this was re-recorded as 4 cellos, you know, I wanted it to main, you know, keep its authenticity. So that's kind of like my philosophy behind it. That was my little underground rule. Just make it sound like it's 4 cellos and nothing else. So there is nothing else on there. There's no piano, there's no violins. I really wanted to show what this instrument's capable of. Every single cello's using improvisations A articulation. So as you load up there, they're all using just that improvisations A. They're just all using the spot and close microphones just exactly as it's loaded up. There's a tiny bit of reverb that's built into the instrument, but I've also added additional reverb afterwards, which I'll talk about shortly. But onto the chord progression. Like I say, it's nothing amazing. It is just it's a D to start with. Then it goes down to an A minor, then F major, finally a G sus2 chord, and then it goes back again. So as you can hear, that top A just carries on, that top A just carries on throughout that whole chord progression. I think that lasts about 18 bars, but it's just sounding interesting the whole time, so I just left it on there. The G sus2 chord is kind of like the thing that makes this track work, really. G sus2 chords for me are one of those hidden little gems that if you use them, they bring quite a lot of tension to the music without being too crazy. It's not like some, you know, weird 11th chord or anything, you know, too weird like that. It is just, it's the root and the 5th and then the 2nd note of the scale. So on this G, it's G, D, and then A. You can play it here, but I prefer it when you play the sus2 note. They're more of a melody line, and then it's one of those chords that feels like it kind of wants to go somewhere. When you leave it playing for a long time, it's like, I need to get back somewhere. And then when you do, when you land back on the root again, it kind of feels like home again. It's just creating enough tension in the music to make it sound interesting. It doesn't feel minor, it doesn't feel major. You can go up to the major. So it's one of those chords, it's one of my like right, I just need some tension here, what shall I do? And it's, you know, it's one of those things that you just got in your back pocket to use. I'll play it in a couple of different places just so you can hear that chord again. So this is an F sus2 chord. And back to home again. And you go up to the minor, sounds quite good. So yeah, it's quite a nifty little chord if you do just need something like that. So the piece was written, I split it up into the 4 cellos, and then kind of like shuffled the notes around until I was happy, and made sure, you know, on each single part of this, there is only 4 cellos playing at any one time. I was quite sort of like, you know, quite particular about that, that I didn't want it to, you know, to hide anything. And then towards the end of the composition is where some of these more, it's mainly written all on the middle layer of the improvisation note, so just this middle velocity layer. But then towards the end is where some of these more, some of these crazier notes are playing. There's only a couple of times in the whole piece where I used the lowest velocity layer, and this was a case of just writing it, and then I was just pulling the velocities of the notes around to get it, you know, to where I want it to be. I didn't play it like that. I played it just standard first, and then went, right, okay, this note, yeah, I really want that to stand out, so I'll use the upper velocity. And then I think where it probably highlights best that I used the lowest one is just on this final chord. Where this note down here, an A, is using that very lowest, thin, glossy, quite breathy note at the end. And then I really like this this cello that's just kind of like playing this walking line up to the end. So yeah, that's kind of like how the composition was written. Like I say, this isn't award winning, but I wanted to show that a simple composition can sound really, really interesting just with 4 versions of this. And this is only using one of the improvisation layers. You've still got a whole nother one to use, and it's mainly only using, you know, the majority of the time it's only using that middle velocity layer. So it's kind of only using a 1/6 really of all of the improvisations that you've got, and to me it still sounds really interesting. Kind of what I did afterwards, there was a patch here about 2/3 of the way through where the music calms down a little bit before it reaches that kind of like crescendo at the end. And this was a time crunch thing. I was really running out of time to get this, you know, for the deadline. So what I did was just took the master bus, and instead, what I really should have done was kind of like taken each individual one and changed all of their articulations, all of their expression layers separately. But this is behind the curtain, so I kind of, you know, you need to see exactly what I did. Was just take the master stereo out and just change the volume globally of all 4 instruments, so they all kind of, they're obviously all, you know, undulating and changing their dynamics naturally within the note themselves. But this was kind of like really fine tuning and really pushing around that section of the music. There is just a final tail off as well, just to make sure I really capture, you know, catch the end of it before the reverb tail happens, and make sure there's no clipping at the end. In terms of post-processing, because I know you all want to see this, is the 4 cellos were panned separately. So I kind of like thought about them as almost as like violin, viola, cello and bass. So cello 1 is the bass note, so I pushed that over to the right hand side of the mix. The middle 2, kind of like, you know, the cello and potentially a viola, were more towards the middle of the mix. And then cello 4, which carries the main melody line, if you will, was pushed more over to the left-hand side. So it kind of simulates how string players might actually sit live in a room. And just for you Logic users, the best way to do this is with stereo pan. I think by default, Logic is set to balance, but a few updates ago they made it into a stereo pan. Now balance basically is if you've got a stereo signal, if you push balance over to the left hand side, what it's doing is actually just taking the right hand signal all the way down. So you're losing half of your signal. Or if you take it over, you know, if you push this on balance, if you push this all the way over to the right hand side, what you're doing is actually just reducing the volume of the left hand signal. So in Logic, I don't know what this is like in Cubase and Pro Tools and things like that. So in the comments, if anybody's a Cubase user, please let other people know if this is the same or not. But in Logic, you want to make sure it's on stereo pan. So when you've got it kind of over the left, as I have, they're about, you know, -35 there, something like that. It doesn't really matter too much. Is that both the left and right hand parts of the signal are being pushed over into the left hand part of the speaker. And conversely, on this cello 1, which is doing the you know, the main bass line sort of thing, is that rather than reducing the left hand signal, what it's doing is pushing it over into the right hand side. And what that does for me, it's a very, very subtle change in the way it sounds, but you're not losing any of that audio information. So I've probably gone on far too long about that, but when I first found out about it, it was kind of like a little, you know, coin drop for me that that's the way it was. They're all gained roughly the same. In terms of post-processing, I've used FabFilter. Absolutely, I'm not, you know, paid to say this or anything, but FabFilter are absolutely amazing people, and they come up with some absolutely amazing plugins. This is probably as much as Logic itself to buy, but I think it's worth it, every single penny of it. Concert Hall Vienna is the golden ticket. I don't think I used anything else. Paid £149 for one preset, but it's worth it. I don't touch it at all. I just load it up, and that's the one I use. It's set to 100% mix, and then everything's just bust. And then I think it's roughly 0 dB in the bus to every single one of those cellos. And then in terms of like the final master for this one, again, it was such a quick turnaround. I didn't export a mix and then do a master. It was just a case of like, let's get it done. So this is kind of just a high pass filter at the end, just to take off any of the low energy. And then because it was 4 cellos, there's quite a lot of build up around that sort of area, around the 200 to 500 hertz mark. So I just pulled a fraction down there and then just lifted the top end ever so slightly. There wasn't an awful lot to do. I find small EQs like that, especially on the master, you know, they do a great deal. The instruments themselves were left pretty much by default. Everything's just as it was out the box, no EQ on there. The spot on the close mics exactly as they're lifted out of the box. So I did want to show you what this thing could do without having to do too much to it. If you haven't got FabFilter, just use I honestly think the internal reverb within Logic is amazing, but FabFilter is just that extra little ticket. But if you haven't got it, if you can't afford it, then Logic's is absolutely fine, don't worry about it. And then just the final limiter on the end, I bring everything to -1. For anything for the web, definitely I limit at -1, because sometimes when you upload to things like SoundCloud or YouTube, if you output the ceiling at kind of like 0.5 dB or 0 dB, sometimes it does end up with clipping, just because of the way YouTube and stuff, you know, messes with it after you've uploaded it. And then all I do is just push up the gain until, you know, it sounds loud, but it still sounds musical and it hasn't crushed the dynamics too much. So that's just add to taste, really. And that's all it was. So post-processing, very, very minimal on this one. It is as you know, pretty much as simple as it gets. So hopefully that's given you like a real good idea about how this track was made, and you know, how I came up with it, and the kind of like the thought process behind it. If there's anything more you want to know about it, leave me a comment in the section below and I'll respond to it. You know, anything at all about what I've done, or, you know, let me know if it's good. Let me know if you don't like it, or you think, wait, he should have done that. Why, you know, why wasn't that included, or why didn't he do that kind of thing? So I'm well up for constructive criticism. I can take it on the chin if you don't think it's good enough. So let me know. But I just wanted to show you kind of, you know, what this thing's capable of with just 4 simple cellos. So yeah, that's it for now. I'm going to do a few more of these as we go on, because a lot of people have asked if I can do these a bit more often, and for some of the other tracks. So yeah, let me know what you think of this kind of thing, and I'm sure you'll see more of them in the future. So that's it for now. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.